I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming out tonight. This is something that we would like to do on a regular basis. There's a lot of members of NYSOA that I think that it'd be great that we can showcase each of us, and we did Bill Hilt Sr. Last year. We got Leo tonight, but I would like to see us, Glenn, Bill Jr., Megan, I see, Sue on here, John, any of you guys. I'd like to rotate through this and just have a little Q&A, maybe promoting books or writings that we're doing. It just gives people a better idea of who we are. And I think it could be a lot of fun. So thanks, Dan, for stepping up to be the MC tonight for this. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's an honor for me to host this tonight because Leo is, when I went to my very first NYSOA event in 2006, Leo was the one that grabbed me by the arm and over the years has taught me a lot about the organization and about outdoor writing. And I think he's a perfect one for this. Glenn was there as well, and Bill were at the same conference that was in Plattsburgh. So those guys have all been at this for quite a bit. But Leo has been a real kingpin of the organization for quite some time. He's organized quite a few events and basically seen a lot of changes, good times and bad, from what he's told me over the years. And I'm sure he's got a few notes on such things to talk about tonight. So, Leo, we're going to turn this over to you, but I'm going to throw a few questions at you. And the first one is basically, how you got started at outdoor writing, and with that, how you kind of came along to be a member of NYSOA.
Okay. Well, I'd been a writer for about 10 years, and then Paul Kiesler kept bugging me to join. So Paul was probably my mentor, and he convinced me to join. So
you might want to tell these guys who Paul was.
Okay, yes. Yeah, Paul Kiesler was a writer, the man who actually founded the New York Sportsman magazine for 20-some years. And it covered all of New York State. It really was a great magazine. In fact, I've got some old copies here just to quick show you. But obviously, Paul founded this magazine, and I got to write for him for a couple years. As I got to write with him, he convinced me that I should join the New York State Outdoor Writers. And I did. That was 38 years ago. So anyway, Paul was my mentor and good friend. And then later on, he fought with 3 different types of cancer. And I did take him fishing a few times when he couldn't drive or go. But Paul was an all-around outdoorsman, but loved fishing and canoeing especially. So I used to take him on some of these trips.
So how new was the organization when you joined? I mean, they were maybe 15 years, something like that?
Something like that. I could probably tell you that.
Because we celebrated 50, well, it'll be 7 years in 2024, so we're going on 57 years here in 2024. Okay. So go back 35 and do the math. But so basically, the organization has had more years with you than it had without.
Yeah, I guess that's a way of putting it. Anyway, as I joined the organization, I did not want to be just a passive member, somebody who paid their dues and went to a meeting now and then. I wanted to be active and part of it. So I did. In fact, the second year in, I organized my first conference. And since then, I have organized 15 of them, conferences and safaris. I know that, let's just say that they were very different in those days. They were bigger. We had more members, and more members attended. That's maybe just part of the times. Anyway, the first one I had was an old forge, and that's where I met Bud Kilmartin. Now, most of you would not know Bud Kilmartin, but let's just say that Bud was a real character, and he kind of took me under his wing for a lot of things. I won't go into that, but there is where I really met my first bunch of good friends: Bob McNitt, Ron Koloj, Mike Seymour, and they were known as the three amigos there that kind of started palling around with them. And then, of course, the other thing is in those days, we all wrote for the New York Sportsman magazine. And I also organized a few safaris for that weren't for the New York City Outdoor Writers. I become involved with other things in the early days. I was, I guess, liaison officer, you might call it unofficially, between the supporting members and the regular members. Mainly, there was a couple big rifts, and the supporting members were all going to quit. That's when I forgot who it was. Maybe it was Doug Fiegel. But anyway, they turned around and asked me and Ed Feldman and Mac McKenzie to be the committee. Would you please go and talk these guys into staying? So we did. We had 2 or 3 meetings and we convinced them to stay. So that solved the one split. That was back in 1994. Then about 10 years later, there was another one that Doug Kanzler and a couple other guys. Doug was a man who basically did video maps ahead of his time. He took his technology with him when he died suddenly, but Doug Kanzler and I were appointed to try to come up with some ways to keep the supporting members active. So I did those 2 things. I don't know if anybody ever used our plans or not, but we had them. I went on to serve as president in year 2001 to 2002, a 2-year term. And I guess you might say I got thrown into the fire. Bill Hiltz turned over the gavel to me and says, good luck. It seems that there was a big split in the membership anyway. And then I was faced with 2 burning issues. Number one, the scholarship committee had just given our scholarship to a card-carrying, flaming PETA member. And then the other thing was the fact that we were broke and did not have any money for the EIC, the writing awards. First one dealt with the PETA member. I sat down and thanked everybody, blah, blah. And I said, there's no way in hell we are going to give that scholarship to a PETA member. And everybody went up and argued, oh, God, what happened? She's threatened to sue us. She'll sue us. I said, let her sue. Who cares? You know, we had the lawyer anyway. Shav Venetian was the lawyer. And Shav said, hey, we'll probably win. I says, besides, look at it this way. I mean, of course, money was different then, but I says, she's going to spend $5,000 on a lawyer to win a $1,000 scholarship. Bull. Let her try. So we sent her it was more of a polite letter than I wanted to, but anyway, we sent him a letter and she blustered, but she ended up dropping the case. So we got rid of PETA. The second big thing was obviously dealing with the money for the EIC. And we've been scraping it together for a couple of years. And they did not have any ideas. Melody Kennedy, was a great lady who was my treasurer, secretary, actually both, for several years. Melody and somebody else come up with the idea, why don't we have a raffle, but not a normal raffle, or a gun or something. Have a raffle whereby we offered ourselves as prizes. You could pick your own specialty, whether it be trout fishing, muskie fishing, deer hunting, so on. So we did that. We had a lot of guys sign up. A lot of them didn't. A lot of them said, "Oh no, I don't want to take anybody else, and I'm afraid to have somebody else come to my house." Well, anyway, there was enough of us that offered ourselves as prizes. I personally offered deer hunting, and two of Dan Ladd's friends, Ross Sheridan, one of them, and Stanley, came over. They spent 2 nights, 3 days with me. I took them up north deer hunting. They had a great time. Stanley actually missed a 10 or 12 point buck. He had buck fever. But they had a good time. And of course, the irony was that Ross Sheridan turned out to be a millionaire. He turned around and repaid the favor by inviting me over to stay at his house. And we stayed at his house and went turkey hunting and rode around on his big boat and had a great time. So that was, I consider Ross one of the unusual people, interesting people that I've met. Anyway, I survived the 2 years. I think that I also brought a lot of healing to the organization, and we started to put it on a sound financial basis. So we weren't always scraping the bottom of the barrel to meet our expenses. So that was basically it. I put us on a sound financial basis, did a lot of healing, and we also turned around and made a bunch of other little things that seemed like a big thing. I was the one that started the communication by email. I says, this is foolish. So we're sending all these letters and waiting for somebody to answer. We've all got, most of us had email back in those days, and we at least communicated, and we even made it official to vote on a lot of things rather than waiting 6 months for the next conference. So that was, say, the basics. I've got many other things, but anybody have any questions?
Can I hit you with a couple questions, Leo?
Yes, certainly.
I, for one, and I think some of the other members here would like to hear what it was like back in the 80s, not just the organization, but the writing community, the opportunities that were there, not just for New York Sportsman, but for, other publications. It seems like there was probably a lot more weekly newspaper columns across the state back then, and a better opportunity for more members. I mean, can you compare that then to today? What you recall from that?
Oh yeah, definitely. There was a lot more opportunities. Obviously the New York Sportsman gave a lot of opportunities, but there was a lot of others. I can't think of some of the names now, but there were a lot of tabloids. There were a lot of, even small newspaper articles. I think there's at least 2, maybe 3 out around Syracuse. There were, like I say, these other ones that were statewide. So certainly there was a lot of opportunities. At the very least, you got paid for it and qualified. Also, there was others out of state that were looking for New York State experiences. There were several in Vermont, and, Canada, Pennsylvania, that would send a query and ask about something. Um, may not always have paid a lot, but it got your foot in the door. So yeah, there was a lot of opportunities. Now if we look at it, and there's hardly any opportunity as far as newspaper goes. Most of the papers, if they're surviving, they've dropped the outdoors column. So that's a big change. As far as qualifying, well, like I say, people could write for some of these smaller publications and then hopefully get a bigger job. But in any case, they qualify. And then the same even with magazines. To be honest, there's a lot more magazines out there. They may not all have been quality of the New York Sportsman, but certainly they got your name out there. Does that answer that question?
Back in those days, when I look through old directories that I have, in fact, Melody gave me quite a few older directories from the 80s at least, and definitely the 90s. Back then, did they have two conferences rather than a conference and a safari? And how did that come to switch, to having the smaller, more informal meeting that a safari is?
Well, I think part of it was just plain necessity. I remember the year, I'll see, you got the year down. Yeah, we had the two conferences, spring and fall, and then it got to be less people in the spring. Fall was still a bigger time. More people were free. There was deer hunting. There was more activities going on, but we had decided. I remember Ron Koloje and Scott Sampson were put on that committee, and we did a survey on how many would come to more than one conference, and which would you prefer? And at that time, the preference was they would rather come to a fall conference. So what we did was come up with the safaris, where basically it was just a get together. You'd aim for a smaller crew, maybe 12, maybe 15 tops. You would find some place that offered hunting and fishing. It wasn't supposed to be a meeting or any real business. Committees could sit and discuss things if they wanted to, but we just pick a spot. And then ironically, shortly after, a couple of people who had the safaris turned around and they started getting big and turning into conferences, and they fell off. I remember the one that, again, I did that one on Night Lake. The committee come back with two choices, both down the Catskills. Very expensive, cost a lot more than the conference did. And people said, well, what are we going to do? I said, reject it. I said, you know what, are you going to go? Well, no, I'm not. And reject the damn thing. So they said, well, we can't be without a meeting or a safari. I said, listen, a safari doesn't have to be that elaborate. I said, give me 2 weeks. I'll put one together. So we did. Well, actually, it only took me a week. Ted Dobbs was a member then. Ted Dobbs and I put one together for Oneida Lake. We had cabins that were given to us. We fished, we hunted turkey. The total cost, I think, was definitely less than $100. It was probably like about $85. And I remember Leon Archer got 2 turkeys. First one, he goes out with he hadn't hunted turkeys before. Goes out with Lou Pulverini. Lou hands him a call and teaches him on the way to the spot. You get down there, boom. Sure enough, Leon calls, in comes a turkey. Leon blasts it. Next day, he, Melody, Frank, Kennedy, somebody else all go to another spot. They didn't have Pulverini to guide them, but they went to another spot and there was a lot of turkeys. Leon sits down under a tree, calls, and again, in about 20 minutes, gets another turkey. So we all kidded us. Leon, you better, forget about the rest of the weekend. Run down to the corner and buy a few lottery tickets. But anyway, that was the kind of the beginning of the safaris, and they've been big, they've been small, but there's no formula for them. It's mainly getting together and doing some things like fishing, canoeing, hiking, shooting. So that's basically what the safaris were intended to be. And that's what they usually have then.
Folks, while we got here, does somebody want to ask Leo a question about his days with the organization? Any stories, anything like that? Just come on out and again, just if you would identify yourself and pop your question.
I will say that the meetings were bigger, maybe because we didn't work all the details out ahead of time. The meetings were bigger and they were more fun. I say that sarcastically because there was 2 or 3 that I recall where they almost ended up in fistfights. I think Billy Hiltz and I forgot who else, and we kind of broke them up before they kind of got to range. But yeah, there is some big hullabaloos. I'll talk about the reason for it in a minute, but Spider was one of them. Spider Ryback was a real character. Big, tall, lanky guy. That was his pen name, which stands because he supposedly looked like a spider, but Ryback was Ukrainian for fisherman. So anyway, a lot of that involved trying to raise money to get the tax write-off, the tax exemption there. And there were some dealings, and then in the end, they hired somebody who was a specialist who got the taxes down. But what happened is Chavanetian, being a lawyer, said he could do it. Spider said, why didn't you do it? And one thing led to another, and I said, luckily it was a big meeting and they were a long ways apart, so we could get between them. There was another one, had to do with trout stocking. And some of the places they were putting trout in for, I guess, catch and release or something, I don't know. Or anyway, I remember at that one, Spider, with the aid of a little alcohol, got up there and got into a big meeting verbally with some people. And again, I think Scott Sampson and I broke that one up. But so they were a little more fun. Dick Nelson and Mike Kelly often went at each other. They didn't come to blows, but the nearest thing. So anyway, some of those fights were almost physical.
Leo, I remember a conference that a few people that are on this chat probably remember, and that's the famous Fire and Ice Conference in Lake Placid. I can't recall the year. I want to say it was 2009, but
Yeah,
we got up there. I remember coming up to Lake Placid, going to check into my hotel, which would have been what I've always known as the Northwoods Inn, the old Whiteface Inn right there in town, or what Marcy Hotel or whatever it's called, the big white building in town. And I pull in the parking lot, and a guy says, "Are you here with the writers?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you're over at the Best Western now." I said, "Okay." And they said they had a fire, and then we didn't get the details till later, but you were scrambling, running around like crazy at that time behind the scenes. Can you
Yeah,
recollect on some of that?
yeah, you're right, that was the famous Fire and Ice Conference. Um, we're going up, and as we were coming over from Saranac, I could see all the mountains covered with snow. I said, that's not necessarily a good sign for some of the things we're going to be doing. And then as we pulled into Lake Placid, we started to pull into the parking lot of the Northwoods Hotel. All of a sudden, there's cops out there, firemen. I said, that's really not good. So basically, we went ahead and they canceled that. I mean, obviously, they couldn't use the Northwoods. So it was Columbus Day weekend, one of your worst times to try to find spare rooms in Lake Placid. But they put us, well, thanks to Margaret Marchuk, who was a sweetheart and a great person. Margaret was putting it together with the guy from Northwoods and somebody from the chamber, and they sat over at the. She says, "You just go ahead and have your meeting. You have fun." She says, "We'll take care of it." And they did. They put us in 3 different hotels. We had to change everything except for we did have the final breakfast at the Northwoods, but yeah, that was a big hassle. I remember I got a nice room at the Golden Arrow, and then I had to turn around and move out of that to some little dumpy, well, it wasn't a little dumpy, but dumpy apartment over on Main Street that was above an all-night pizza joint. Um, I remember that that time well, between everything else, like I say, Koloje volunteered to help me. So we had to move a lot of people that day after they went off their outings, and Koloje and I spent the day moving it. I think the only thing we got to do was to go up, take the gondola up Whiteface. That was the only fun we had over the weekend. I remember it cost me about another $100 out of my own pocket, because I remember, let's say that the conference is somewhat expensive, so it was like whatever, $350. Then it cost me another $100 just to pay for extra things that came up. So I got home on Sunday. I looked and I had $50 left in my wallet. So I says, hell, I walked up to then the florist shop uptown here, and I asked Kelly, who was running. I says, Kelly, will $50 buy a nice floral arrangement? She said, oh yeah. She showed me. I says, I said, that's all I got. I said, that'll take care of the florist and whatever tax and crap. Yep. She says, I'll do it for you, Leo. So they sent that out on Monday. I get a call from Margaret on Tuesday. Oh, she was just practically in tears. Oh, that was so wonderful of you, and she went on and on. I said, well, Margaret, I said, that's the least you could do. You saved my butt. I said, it would have been a total disaster. We'd have gone home if it wasn't for you. Thank you. So that was on Tuesday. Thursday, Margaret calls me again. This time she's in tears because they fired her. So I said, that was the Fire and Ice Conference. I don't have real good memories of that.
Anybody have any questions for Leo about the organization or his time with the organization?
A couple other conferences that stick out. One was the one that practically nobody went to. we had a conference down in Hamilton, which was kind of nice. It was a little different. We stayed in these cabins and had a good time. The Canadians who had hosted us for other things before. The Canadians came down and they had a big budget, so they were spending money like crazy. Got most people pretty well drunk that night. So the next day, we were supposed to go to, doesn't matter, but the Canadians kind of suggested that we go up to Sudbury, Ontario instead. And everybody was there was kind of hangover and, oh, okay. Yeah. So with the hangovers on their mind and the fact that the Canadians were such jolly good fellows, they all voted to go up to Sudbury, Canada for the spring conference or fall conference, whatever. Well, come time, everybody straightened out and they says, I'm not going up to Sudbury. What the hell is that? So the whole thing, I think there was 5 people, McNetts, Colojays, and somebody else. There was 5 people went to the conference. So I guess you could say that was the one that obviously didn't happen.
It's about what we had in Corning.
What's that?
That's about what we initially had in Corning.
Yeah.
Before we rescheduled.
One, yeah. The other one that I remember, let's see. Oh, yeah, we had another one. Oh, yes, Rochester. Again, there was a case at Rochester. We were out there and we had I forgot the bid someplace. There was a couple, we had 2 or 3 bids. One was a really good looking, but these nice ladies from Rochester all came out. They sat and they schmoozed everybody and gave them a great presentation of all the things we could do in Rochester. So obviously, the membership voted to go to Rochester the next fall. This was like the spring conference, and we're going in the fall, so we didn't have a whole lot of time. Fine. All right. I'm not running it. I was president. We get home that week, I get a call from the ladies in Rochester. When are you coming out? Who is going to run the conference? What? I says, yeah. We need somebody to run this conference. Somebody to take charge. And I won't repeat what I said. It's not for polite company. But I says, what the heck are you talking about? Yeah, well, we thought we could get so-and-so, a couple people out there. They told us where we could go. So they said, not only do we not want to run that conference, we aren't going to go to it. So now, again, 5 months away or 6 months, whatever, we got no conference out there. The one thing that saved us was Kathy Ball-Beer. The Rochester ladies I went out, so I said, all right, we got to have a meeting. So I went out, Frank and Melody came up, and we met with these people. And they says, well, I says, you got all these little things you got to do. And the Rochester people said, well, we got a gal who runs a PR firm. He says, name is Kathy Ball-Beer, and she's very good. I says, well, Frank and Melody and I kind of agreed that's about the only choice we had. So we turned it over to, well, I didn't turn it over. We worked with Kathy. She did a lot of the legwork, letters. She made a few phone calls for organizations. She did a great job. And Kathy and I become good friends because of that. She basically saved our butt in Rochester. But that was a close call too. Yes.
Someone have a question?
Yeah, hey Leo, hey Leo, it's excuse me, hey Leo, it's Chris Paparo. So
yes, Chris.
you've been to a bunch of different locations throughout the state for these conferences and safaris. Is there any one place that for you that just jumped out as like a really like like highlight of New York or something that was just like the opportunities were just amazing?
Yeah, probably. I'll be honest. Obviously, I had three of them up in Old Forge area, but that was good because again, there was plenty to do: canoeing, hiking, fishing, hunting. But I think the best, or I've had a couple up there and a safari, was up in Clayton. Now, it's not saying that there aren't other places that did a good job, but I would have to say that the best was in Clayton. Um, you had a little bit bigger town, you had more opportunities, um, you could do things. I mean, yes, the fishing was still a big attraction, but number one, um, each time there was always something different. The last time was the new hotel, of course, that kind of set it off. So I think that Clayton probably would be my favorite spot, both for opportunities. Secondly, they also contributed, the Clayton Chamber of Commerce did, which I got a comment on that, but basically they also helped out so that it was very affordable. And and even if people didn't want to go fishing or hiking stuff, there was plenty to do around town. So that worked out well. So I guess Clayton holds a special spot in my heart.
I got a story from that 2015 Clayton conference that I'll never forget, and that's all of us walking down the street at 4 o'clock in the morning and meeting in the hotel lobby prior to that with our shotguns to go turkey hunting. There was, I can't remember if it was 9 of us or 11 of us, but we got on a barge, went across the channel, the river, over to the island. I can't remember the name of the island. I should know the name of the island.
Grindstone.
Grinds, yes, and we all hunted. I was fortunate enough to get a bird that day, but we all come back, and it's about 11 o'clock in the morning, and now we got to walk back up the street in our camouflage with our shotguns. I'm carrying a bag with a turkey breast in my hand, and there was a wedding just getting going at the park right there next to the hotel, and here comes a dozen of us, or however many it was, 9 or 10 or 11, whatever it was, and we're walking up the street with our shotguns and our camouflage and our turkey hunting gear, and people are just kind of looking at us like, "Wow, who are these people?" Just
Yeah.
was somebody going to ask Leo a question there? I think somebody was getting ready to chime in.
Hi, so hi, this is Megan Fleet Postal Leo. My daughter Louisa has a question for you, and I'm sorry if it's not about the history of Nisoa.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Hi, Leo. My name's Louisa, and what's your favorite color?
Did you catch that?
No, I didn't get the last part. What was that?
Say it again.
What's your favorite color?
What's your favorite color?
My favorite color? Hard to say. Probably red. I got a bunch of shirts and jackets all red for hunting, but I like to wear them anyway.
He's wearing red right now.
Thank you, Leo.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Just
you.
a couple other things. We're talking about conferences, and I know the times have changed. Okay, I'm not saying we've got to go back to the old days or anything, but I know the times have changed. I know that I never had hardly any help from a county. Counties were usually a wasteland that wanted to, oh yeah, we'll set you up. Well, big deal. They didn't want to spend any money. So I think the only ones, Clayton had the Chamber of Commerce there, and Old Forge had the CAC, which is a business association. Both of those, contributed. But St. Lawrence sure as heck never gave me a nickel. And Herkimer County never gave a nickel. Yet I did well on those things by going to some local groups. And I think that sometimes people say, oh, the first thing you got to do is get a hold of the county. Well, it could be. Now, I know Oswego County did come through, but most cases, counties have not come through. That was one thing. And then the other thing is, with the scholarship committee. The scholarship committee, again, I kind of fell into that. Well, Bud Kilmartin helped me. Bud Kilmartin he was a character, but he could get money out of people. Anyway, we used to obviously solicit prizes from the members. Well, now, let's be honest, most of the supporting members do not make anything. I mean, they don't make products. They're business organizations. So you've got to go outside the group to get prizes. Now, I'm not saying that's the only way, but obviously for about 10 or 12 years, I was the main one that solicited all those prizes. Some years we had to take, 2 vehicles just to fill them. Billy Hills would come over, stop over the house on the way, and we'd pack up his van. I'd take the car, and we had that many goodies to auction or raffle off. Well, we don't have that anymore. So I think they have to find some creative ways, which they are not doing. That's my one criticism is lately. I mean, we had a few, like down at Corning, we had some nice ones, but generally it's been a tough road. And it's just that, well, the reality, but I think they have to think of that. Just a couple other things about conferences. Like I say, I've met a lot of interesting people in this job. A lot of interesting people. Some like Ross Sheridan, like I said, who invited me up to spend a weekend at a millionaire's place. I know we went by and I looked at this one building there, and I said, wow, it's a nice place. And somebody says, that's the guest cottage. The place to the right is Ross's. I said, but I had a good time with Ross. I've got to meet Pete Granis. We took Pete Granis fishing a couple times. And
You might want to
Pete,
tell him who Pete Granis was.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Pete Granis was the DEC commissioner. And I used to go down to these meetings that they used to have down in Albany. And I got to know Pete and invited him to come up to the St. Lawrence for the opening of bass season. And anyway, that is where they got the new hotel. The new hotel, they were looking at it, but like in typical Albany fashion, it was kind of sitting there and bypassed the committees, and paperwork got buried. And we took Pete around there that one day, and Al just subtly kind of said, well, he says, this is kind of sitting there, he says, in red tape. He says, that prime property sitting in red tape. In 2 months it was cleared. So Pete helped us out quite a bit. Of course, we did invite him as a friend out to Rochester, but that's when he got into a disagreement with the commissioner, or the governor, who fired him. Another one that I know some people didn't get along with was Mike Zagata. Mike Zagata I got to know pretty well, because we both shared a love of grouse hunting. Mike had been a variety of things. He was the DEC commissioner and loved grouse hunting. So, until recent years, he used to always call me up about the end of September and say, how's the grouse hunting? But yeah, I've hunted with Zagata, fished with Granis. They were good eggs. and a couple others that came to the conferences. John Cahill and Aaron Crotty were also DEC commissioners that came and gave pretty frank talks. So those were some of the interesting people I met. Just a few other people that I mentioned. One of the ones who wasn't a DEC commissioner or anything else, but part of the job, was meeting Eddie the Eagle. Now, most of you don't even remember Eddie the Eagle. That was back at the Calgary Olympics. This crazy little British guy wanted to get in the Olympics. All of Slotsville, Britain, did not have a ski jumper. So he went to Finland, taught himself ski jumping, came back and managed to ski without getting killed. But then I met Eddie also up in Lake Placid. He was up there practicing later. So Eddie the Eagle was, I got his picture hanging down in my bar. Others like Bud Kilmartin, I won't go into that, but some of you old timers might remember Kilmartin. But he was certainly an interesting character. Katie Mitchell, Bass Pro Shop, used to call me, and we started the Pasadena Award, but Katie was a good egg, and still is. Another one who's a member here, probably not to him now, but George Frank. George is a member, a very quiet guy, but also one of the more interesting people I met, who typically would go down bill fishing down in Baja California, stop on the way back, shoot a peccary or whatever they call those wild pigs in Arizona, and then he'd go working on a tugboat on the Gulf of Alaska for a couple months. So George is an interesting character. Tom Iacovella was an artist, fisherman. He's dead now, but Tom was one who had been an orphan. He raised a lot of money as an artist. He's the one that created that life-sized sculpture of a deer, and actually sold it to Bass Pro Shop eventually. But he, for a while, was the holder of the record brook trout caught up in Racket Lake. And I remember I did a story on him, and of course Tom's comment was there, he says, fishing wasn't very good that day. He says, I only caught one fish. Gary Lee, forest ranger from Inlet, who's kind of a Renaissance man, does everything. Of course, I mentioned Ross Sheridan, Pete Granis, and then the other friend, Scott Faulkner, who is, again, does everything with the conservation department. He doesn't work for the conservation department, but is communication. So those are some interesting people that I've met. Yes.
Hey, Lee, I got a question for you. This is Chris Aparo again. In all your years at NYSO, what's one of your most memorable times? Was it, something at a conference, hunting? Is there something that, like, when you think of NYSO, what's like the first thing that, like, your history of NYSO, what's the first thing that kind of pops into your head? Is there like one thing that really jumps out at you? Okay.
Actually, it wasn't a NYSO event, but it was connected. I was getting lost on the tundra of Alaska. Leon Archer and I used to go on different fishing expeditions. Usually it would be something like floating down the Shenango River and blasting a few ducks or fishing for walleye or something. But this one year, Leon calls me up and says, "You doing anything after school?" I said, "Well, nothing that can't be changed." He says, "Good, because I just bought a place in Alaska." He said, "I want you," he says, "and Mike Seymour to come up, spend a couple weeks with me." Well, that took me about 5 minutes to say yes, and says, "I can change it." We were up there. Now, if you're familiar with the tundra in Alaska, it's all just kind of rolling. It's like nothing but beach balls. And make a long story short, his cousin was working up there as a guide. We had been fishing. The fishing was fabulous. We just had great fishing. Because the irony, Mike Seymour has always outfished me, but the 2 times that he didn't was up there. And one was the day they were filming a video of them getting off the track. One night we're sitting out there on the deck, looking to the east, and there's a dog-leg bend in the river. And Mike says, geez, he says, looks like it's going to clear up. I said, Mike, that's to the east. I said, our weather is coming from the west off the Bering Sea. Well, we wanted to see some wolves, a bear. So his cousin said, well, we'll take you out. He says, one of these days in the Argo if it's not raining. So an Argo is like a big ATV. So Mike and I in the back seat, Leon and his cousin, all head up to, there had been an Indian camp up on top of the cabin, long since gone, but the guy had an airstrip. So we're up there riding around the airstrip. No moose, no wolves. All of a sudden, his cousin said, geez, he says to Leon, I said, you know where that something where the other end of the airstrip is? And stuff. He said, no. And they were riding around for an hour. And I says, wait a minute, you really don't know where in heck that airstrip ends or where it is? No. And I said, so get out your compass. He said, I can't. He said, I left him in my jacket. It warmed up that day, and he left his jackets back at camp. So now we're riding out there with nothing. The closest is 30 miles to the Bering Sea. And we rode around for a couple hours. Mike says something about, well, we'll be eaten alive by mosquitoes. I said, no, I got mosquito repellent, but I don't think that repels the grizzlies. So anyway, all of a sudden I said, look, see that light over there? I said, yeah. I said, last 2 nights, that's been to the east. And they said, oh, yeah, you know. He says, listen, what else we got to go on? So we headed off in that direction for about an hour. And then all of a sudden, they got off checking the signs, and they hear the sound of generators. They said, oh, my God, generators. And it took me a minute to realize this. There were some other camps. Now, this whole territory up there is nothing, right? The closest village was 15 miles downriver, and that was only about 6 cabins. Anyway, we headed in that direction. And then about an hour later, about 2 o'clock in the morning, we see this little ribbon of blue, which was the Nushagak River. Whoa. So we got up there, and they knew where it was. We followed it downstream and got back to camp about 2:30. The others were all pooped and went to bed. I sat out on the porch and had a couple beers. But that one comes to mind. That was one of our trips with Leon. So,
Did you ever
Hey,
find
Leo.
What's that?
wolves? Did you ever find those bears or wolves?
No, we didn't. Although Mike did after Mike went back up to guide, and he had a case where he was fishing down the river. There was a tree fell in the river, and he tied up to there, and he'd fish for grayling for a couple nights. And then one day he was there. All of a sudden, you see the moose. There's always moose around. They take off running. He couldn't figure out what was going on. And he looks back, and there's a big bear, big brownie, lumbering down the shoreline. So Mike is frantically trying to untie the boat, but he finally gets it just loose enough so it floated off about 8 or 10 feet, and the bear just kind of walked by and looked at him.
Leo, I got a question for you. What do you recall through the years of your hunting and fishing? Not just your hunting and fishing, but anyone's hunting and fishing outings at conferences and safaris. What might stand out from some of those through the years, even going back a while, you know?
Geez, I don't know. That's probably a couple times I've gotten turkeys. I can't even remember which ones now. I have gotten a couple turkeys on conferences. never gotten a deer, but I didn't try too hard. Um, Hard to say. I suppose maybe you talk about the hunting and fishing.
Yeah, not just yourself, but
Yeah.
what you might remember from anyone else, any particular, special experiences or anything. I guess what I'm asking is, do you recall any special stories from people hunting and fishing at conferences or any other outings through the years?
Oh, okay. Well, one is that they didn't get one, but luckily, one of the conferences in Old Forge, Jim Hanley, who was a photographer and fisherman, but he, I don't know, he had a raffle or something before. I don't know, whatever it was. He comes up Old Forge, and I had actually taken Foot McNitt and Hollister. There's about 3 guys who wanted to go deer hunting, and they all saw a deer, but they did not see one big enough to shoot. Hanley comes in that night about 9:30, 10 o'clock. That was the night. That was before we used to stay up with the hospitality. Anyway, Hanley gets me up and he's talking about that. He says, "Oh yeah," he says, "I just got a bow. I think he got a new one now." He says, "Where do I go?" Oh God! So I'm giving Hanley some simple directions. This road he can't get lost on, and he says, "Okay, now I've got on there." He says, "If I shoot a deer, what do I do?" I says, "Well, you can go on down McNitt's there. He'll help you." He says, "No." He says, "What's the next thing I do?" I says, "Next thing you do?" "Yeah." He says, "I've never hunted deer in my life." So I said, I says, "Maybe, Jim, you might want to find something else to do." I says, so I talked Hanley out of going deer hunting. He probably could have gotten a doe down there, but I just remember that. Oops. Yeah, that one comes to mind.
Hey, Leo.
Yes.
So Bill Hiltz Jr.,
Yes, Bill.
Niagara County. You had mentioned that you were a writer for 10 years before you joined NYSOA.
Mhm.
So what got you into outdoor writing?
Actually, I got into it kind of an accident. I was teaching. I was teaching, and I was the editor of a school newspaper. And the paper in those days was pretty good size. They had an outdoor writer, but they fired him because he never met a deadline, or not never, but he often missed his deadlines. And the sports writer come to the president of our club. He says, "Hey," he says, "got anybody?" He says, "that knows about hunting and fishing and can put a couple sentences together?" And he said, "Yeah." This is Leo Maloney can. He says he's always out trout fishing or deer hunting or something. And he says he's teacher, he can write. He says, in fact, he knows enough by putting the school newspaper together. He says, "Well, we'll give him a chance." So they called me up. I went over and talked to the sports writer and said, "I'll tell you what, we'll give you 3 weeks." Said, "All right." So I had my 3-week trial, and obviously I guess I passed it because I'm still there 48 years later. Although I did have 2 short interruptions. I got fired once, and the other time I quit. We had one guy who, let's just say, he was an obnoxious little twit, and didn't like what I was writing and what I was doing. So he ended up telling me that this is the way it's got to be, and I said, "No, I'm not going to do that." So we mutually left on a Friday afternoon, me quitting, him firing me. Except that in those days, there was a big marina in Night Lake, privately owned, and they insisted that they put my column next to their ads. And another guy who was a good friend of mine is Wally Ainsworth, a big turkey hunter, was vice president of a furniture company. I stopped to see him on the way home and told him, right, well, so let's just say that Monday morning, I get a call from the sports editor saying, hey, will you come back? So thanks to the big guys, and I guess there's a few others that the word all spread that I was fired. So I come back and on the same terms. Then the other one was more recent. They had a new guy in, and I remember there's a bunch of ladies. I didn't run that many deer pictures, but I did run some. And they always used to have a tradition. People would bring in their deer on opening day, 7th year, and they take a picture and have small shots in there. Well, anyway, these ladies got together and said, oh, they complained about that. So he says, so no more deer pictures. So I quit. I says, no. So I got mad and told the general editor, I said, sorry, tell him I'm going to quit. He's, oh, no, don't. Try to talk me out of it. I didn't. So then the editor, or the managing editor, or whatever they call him, he calls me up and he says, please come on down. He says, we got to have a talk about this. And that was on a Saturday. I got up Saturday. I says, a nice day. I'm going to go grow something. I called up the picture. I says, tell him I'm forgetting the damn meeting. I'm going to go grow something. So they called me back again. This time I went in. I won't go through the whole idea, but he says, well, the problem is some people find pictures of dead deer offensive. I says, tell them not to look. Tell them to turn the page. I says, in fact, we're talking about that. You know something? That was when Barry Bonds was hitting all the home runs, but I hated Barry Bonds. So I says, you know something? I find pictures of Barry Bonds offensive as a parent and a football or a former baseball coach. So they got a big laugh out of it. He says, all right. He says, you made your point. He says, what do we got to have? I says, no deer, no Maloney. So that was my second time. But,
Any folks have any other questions for Leo?
Yeah, I got another one for Leo.
yes.
So, I am personally familiar with some of the magazines that you've been involved with, Lake Ontario Outdoors, Adirondack Outdoors, New York Sportsman. Are there any other publications that you've been involved with, and any regrets along the way?
Well, obviously, I enjoyed all of those. The other one that was in there for several years was Empire Outdoor Journal. That was a tabloid. And then there've been others that I've written for a short time, but you mentioned the main ones. But no, actually, I enjoyed them all, and I had no regrets. It wasn't that I quit any of them or had anything to do with it, but each case, obviously, New York Sportsman got sold, shut down. Empire Journal, they had a guy who kind of mismanaged that one, and after 4 years or something, that one failed. And then obviously with Lake Ontario and Adirondack Outdoors, I thought we were doing well. Mike, being a banker, he always looked for the income, and he got a little ticked off at the printer. And the printer turned around and says, all right, obviously, if that's where you're going to be, we're going to stick to the fine print, and we want all our money ahead of time. And I forgot how many thousands it was. But yeah, it took several thousand. So obviously, Mike was hemmed and hawed around and talked about going digital, but he didn't. So yeah, those were good old days. So anyway, all of them, I guess, got closed up and sold out from me. Now I still do a few I've done for the Conservationist and obviously for Dan's New York Outdoor News and a couple others, Adirondack magazines on the Salerno brothers, deer hunting. So I've done a few, but yeah, all those other magazines, obviously, I really liked. In fact, just obviously the two here. I know that I will kind of put the plug in with Adirondack Outdoors. I probably felt the worst about that. I mean, I felt bad about New York Sportsman. Probably Brian Dam and I took it the worst of anybody. But then with the Adirondack Outdoors, I know that I went out and recruited all those people. And I know that Bryant was my advertising man. He was great. And I remember he goes up to somebody, doesn't matter who, but he was there and he was showing them with a magazine. Well, there have been a lot of magazines that, you know, last about 3 issues. You know, the guy writes most of the articles himself, and blah, blah. Anyway, this guy says, oh, yeah. He says something. He says, anything good or some kind of snide remark. Bryant hands him a magazine, and he takes one look at the list I had. You know, Dan Ladd, Ed Moon, so on. He goes, holy shit, he says, that's an all-star lineup. And we were doing well. But obviously, Mike didn't think we're doing well enough. So I don't really have any regrets other than the fact that they didn't last.
So I got another question for you, Leo.
Okay.
As someone who's as seasoned and successful as yourself as an outdoor communicator, what advice could you give some of us up and coming outdoor communicators? Like if you were to, try to, I know it's a different world right now with some of the writing and stuff, but is there a piece of advice you could give some of us newer members, newer writers?
Yeah, I think one would be try to find a niche, something a little different. You know, there's only so many. I mean, I know that people still want that on how to catch smallmouth bass in the summer and things like that. But if you can come up with something a little bit different, I know it's not that easy, but if you can come up with something a little bit of a twist to a story, that helps. That's one piece of advice. The other thing is, I guess, just kind of keep working. The list. Like I know that. Well, my final piece of advice there was, let's see. Basically, you're looking for things, and people kind of take the easy way out. I see that. I won't mention any names. I see that sometimes, both in NYSWA and others who want to get started. You got to get a few rejections in there, as well as some new ideas. That's, I guess, a big part of it.
You said rejections. Is there a rejection that stands in your career that kind of maybe stings to this day, but maybe made you a better person or a stronger writer?
Well, I don't know. I know it kind of maybe woke me up. I know that. Let's just say that I give one concrete example. And it's changed. It involved deer hunting. All right. Now I'm a deer hunter. I can't say that I've ever gotten any Boone and Crockett's or anything like that. But I have also, again, met these other people, known a bunch of them. And like this one family up in the upper Adirondacks, the Salerno brothers. Now, those guys hunt hard. They hunt high and hunt hard. and I've done some stories on it. Now, I can't think of hand the titles, but they were just independent ones. There wasn't any regular. Oh, I guess maybe I did one for Lincoln, Adirondack. But I know I did these stories on this guy, who's tracking and all the other little tips, etc. And then all of a sudden I got, you know, some, rejections. Nice way of putting it. Oh yes, thank you, blah blah. But we are changing. So let's say I think it's. I got a couple copies in there now on the end table, but basically, I think it's like Whitedale News or something like that. But basically, what happened is I just didn't realize the change. Now they practically put the whole issue on do it yourself. So they don't really want, me or Rick Redmond or anybody else to spend the money. They just get somebody else who's got a big deer, and they write them all. They'll probably edit it, obviously. But like that's the thing. I got looking at that magazine, and I says, they're all by the one guy, or not the one guy, but the person who got the deer, which is fine. But they don't look for anybody else, and they're not looking at really pretty much the how-to, even as much as this guy set out in his tree stand and set up the trail cams and then got lucky. That's kind of the current niche, and it kind of hit home to me. But I said, all right, if I find something else, I'm not going to waste my time. So I guess you got to kind of look see what the trends are. But yeah, I found that out.
Hey, folks, anybody else got any questions for Leo? We've been running a good hour and some here.
But I just want to say, number one, I've really been proud of being a member of NYSO. Like I say, that's why even after I was president, one time, when Will Elliott was going to be president,
Somebody's got something going on in the background there.
He comes in and throws all the goods on the desk. And they needed secretary and treasurer, so Mike Seymour and I stepped up. We divided the job. And then I did another stint just recently, including as treasurer. But basically, I've been proud of being a member of NYSO. Safe to say that, my best friends have been in NYSO. Obviously, McNitt and Seymour are gone, but guys like Glenn Saper, Billy Hiltz, Bill Hollister, all these guys are still my good friends, and I'm proud to have them. So,
Jared, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. So Leo, obviously you've been in the outdoor industry a very long time. What would you say is the biggest change in technology over the course of that time? Like the real standout one, like say like recurves to compound bows would be an example. Maybe that is the example, but like what was like the wow, this has really changed the game kind of thing. Fishing, hunting, outdoors, whatever you would denote.
Oh, that's a tough one. I would have to say, again, looking at it from my own perspective, that probably bows, both the crossbow, and even changes in bows. I remember when they come out with the Oneida Eagle bow. I knew the guys, and they used to invite me out to trials and stuff. We thought that Oneida Eagle was quite the weapon, but you look at the number of compound bulls out there now, and all the bells and whistles, it's quite different. Obviously, it's still going big. And then this year with the new regulations that as long as you're not using a handicap, you can use you still got a problem, but you can use a crossbow during the regular season. I think that's probably a bigger thing. I just look at the reports from the DEC, and I see that the number of muzzle orders, bows and stuff, those numbers keep going up every year. I would have to say that because it seems that the number of hunters has gone down, but that's just my own personal observation. But hunting is still big, so I think it's probably the new technology. There's new technology in fishing, but it hasn't changed it as dramatically.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for Leo? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I actually might have one. My name's Andrew Zizek. I met you earlier. What would you say is the biggest change since the 80s, or as far as writing goes? Writing is always changing. It's something I've noticed. And I don't know if it's because people tend to write more and more and more, and then the subject changes or the theme changes, or whatever the case might be. How do you think that's changed?
Well, I think that maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just an observation of mine that a lot of people are, at least now, magazines are writing their own articles rather than having somebody write for them. Because before, I used to get calls. I mean, I get a call from, I forgot, doesn't matter, whatever, magazine in Vermont. Back when Tom Iacovella got the record book trout, I got a call from up in Vermont. This is, they knew my writing. This is, do you know Tom Iacovella? I said, yes. He says, do you think you could do a story on him? Yeah, no reason I couldn't. I said, we're good friends. So I think that at least a lot of times they're doing that. Now, I don't know if it's just the age or computers or what, but like I say, I see that now more people, you got a shrinking market. You got a shrinking market out there. And maybe it's just that it seems like more people are writing on their own. If I pick up the deer magazines, 9 out of 10 are all written by the guy who got them. I don't know what the answer is, but I do think that that's the problem. And it's not a solution you're looking for.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Anybody else have any questions here? I had to mute some of you guys. There was some background noise going on there, and I was just doing that through the process of elimination.
Well, like I say, I'm still writing. Not doing as much, but occasionally Dan sends me some. A couple others I've been fortunate. Others I've been kind of fortunate in the sense that they will remember me from something and say, hey, how about doing this story? I'm not a writer, and they'll do a story on it, or especially on something controversial. They like somebody who can maybe try to show both sides, or show one side. I don't always show both sides. Obviously, as those of you know, I'm very anti, I call the meanie greenies of the Adirondacks, but they're on my list. But most cases, like I say, all my close friends, like Bill Hiltz, Dan Ladd, Glenn Saper, Hollister, Sahurik, Deb Grossen, have been my friends and are still my friends all these years. I want to
Well,
thank
Leo,
them for the opportunity.
Leo, it's been a pleasure having you do this for us. I think the folks that see it in the future that weren't tonight will really enjoy it. There's a lot of perspective here, a lot of things to take from the conversation. And I'm glad we had a good turnout. I'm glad a lot of folks chimed in with us tonight. And we're part of this. Want to wish everyone happy holidays. And Leo, thanks again. And be well. Glad you're feeling better. And we expect another 80 years out of you as an outdoor writer.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Thanks.